So Neil is the managing member of Kaufman, McGowan, PLLC, Corporate and Securities Counsel to the state legal cannabis industry, and one of the leading corporate cannabis law firms in the U.S. He combines over 35 years of practicing corporate and securities law with 7 years of extensive cannabis industry experience. He represents a wide variety of cannabis companies and investors in their corporate, securities, financing, borrowing, and merger and acquisition space, contract and other legal matters as well. He has participated in over $2 billion of cannabis industry-related transactions. So, Neil.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at the Long Island Capital Alliance here on this what was supposed to be spectacular Long Island evening. So Michael asked me to say a few words about the state of the cannabis industry, particularly in New York. I would say in general the state of the cannabis industry, despite the recent market meltdowns, is very strong. As one of the leading corporate cannabis lawyers in the U.S., I can report that it is really great, right? I hardly ever have to wear a suit. Even less frequently do I have to shave. The women are beautiful, brilliant, and driven. And let me tell you, at the conferences, the after parties are unbelievable. So yes, the modern state legal cannabis industry is quite great indeed. I think that's it, I'm done. You can go back to the party. Although I think Michael wants to give you a little bit of an update on New York, so I'll try to do that.
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes, right. So, New York's a funny state, right? In 2014, New York became the 23rd state in the U.S. to legalize medical cannabis. Initially, New York created a very restrictive set of conditions for which patients could get cannabis, made it very difficult for doctors to be able to recommend cannabis for treatment, and only granted 5 licenses, which was later increased to 10, each of which licensee was required legally to be fully vertically integrated and was limited to 4 retail stores. Making it even worse, the licensees were not even allowed to sell to each other. So you had to be strictly 100% vertically integrated. As a result, there were only 40 statewide dispensaries. Of those, 5 of them are located on Long Island, in Kyle Place, Lake Success, Huntington, Farmingdale, and Riverhead. 3 are in Brooklyn, 3 are in Queens, the rest are in the rest of the state. No one's quite sure how big the New York cannabis market is. If you include the black market, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 billion, people think. And we really couldn't find any substantial data on the revenues produced annually in the legal market. Maybe somebody else has. We couldn't find it, not for want of looking. But we think it's about $1 billion of legal cannabis, state legal cannabis in New York in the last year or two. So in 2019, 4 years after instituting a medical program, New York finally decriminalized the possession and smoking of regular cannabis flower. And then in 2021, after dealing with all the Cuomo messes and the politics in Albany that held up recreational cannabis legalization for a couple of years, the state legislature finally passed the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, which made New York the 15th state to provide for a recreational market in the U.S. So you have to realize the New York State statute was spearheaded by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which prevailed over Andrew Cuomo because of his scandal troubles and got everything they wanted out of this legislation. So there is a really strong focus on social justice and equity, far more than making the market really function, properly from a business standpoint. Over 100,000 marijuana convictions were suppressed, with many of them being permanently expunged. So one of the weird things about the New York statute is it prohibited vertical integration of cannabis businesses. Unlike the medical statute that required it, the rec statute took the opposite approach, like some other states like Washington that had experienced failed marketplaces, and completely prohibited any vertical integration except for grandfathering the existing 10 medical licensees. The existing 10 licensees are allowed to convert up to 3 of their 4 stores to dual medical and adult use unless the locality that they're in opts out. And on Long Island, there is only one of the existing medical stores is in a jurisdiction that has not opted out of recreational. Like, what a mess that's going to be. They also have to pay an extra fee, which has not yet been determined, and they're required to maintain a minimum amount of medical sales. I'm not quite sure how they're going to do that. So like I said, these existing medical licensees, they're allowed to continue to be vertically integrated, but they're only allowed to distribute their own products. So even they will not be able to engage in broad-based distribution or sales. And they're prohibited from holding any other licenses as well. So in the meantime, while the rec program was getting passed and starting to unfold, the state also, the Office of Cannabis Management expanded the medical program again. They permitted the sale of flower. They removed the $50 patient fee. They increased the supply a patient could get from 30 days to 60 days, all in an effort to try to buttress the medical program for the eventual onslaught of the recreational program, which is inevitable and happens in every state. So after 6 months of delay, New York finally appointed the Cannabis Control Board, including Tremaine Wright as chairman, and they appointed Chris Alexander as the executive director of the New York State Office of Cannabis Management, which is the agency that will regulate cannabis in New York, taking over hemp from the Department of Agriculture and medical marijuana from the Department of Health. Despite the initial delays, 6 months before they even appointed the board, New York is desperately trying to get the recreational cannabis market open and functioning by the end of this year. And they have a plan to do that. Very interesting and innovative plan that nobody else had really done before, as far as I could tell. They allowed previous hemp farmers, which was spread all across upstate New York and some other places as well, including some on Long Island, to apply for a conditional cannabis cultivation license. And 203 former hemp farmers have been granted conditional cannabis cultivation licenses. They're also going to be allowed to apply for processing licenses, so they'll be able to take the crummy flower that they grow outdoors and turn it into usable oil, which is going to be the only way to make that flower, marginally usable in the marketplace. I'm not sure how the state is planning on preserving that crop from when it's harvested in the next couple of months to when it's going to feed into the stores at the end of the year, but supposedly they have a plan. So these conditional licenses are good for 2 years, and then we'll see what happens after that. Most people think that they'll end up getting permanent cannabis cultivation licenses, but we don't really know. These licensees are permitted to grow up to 1 acre of outdoor crop, or 25,000 square feet in a greenhouse, or 20 lights indoors. Right? There are various other requirements, but I'll try not to bore you with too many of the details. The plan is for these cultivators to feed a new round of retail stores to be owned by persons who have been convicted of a cannabis offense in New York. So this is a really progressive step to making up for the sins of the war on drugs. The theory being, well, give these retail licenses to these former cannabis convicted folks and hopefully teach them how to do it. They're going to have a training program and provide them financing. New York State has announced a $200 million fund that will provide 8% interest non-recourse loans to these license holders. The fund is being managed by Chris Webber, former NBA player and a longtime cannabis activist. And they're going to try to train these folks how to run a business. And I think they're just hoping for a handful of success stories, which is probably about all they can hope for under these circumstances, but they're giving it the try to at least launch the market before they come out with a full range of regulations. None of us know what the timing is for when the full range of regulations will be released. They have released regulations on laboratories and on packaging, marketing, and advertising, and labeling, which are, again, very progressive, very thorough. No one's quite sure what the negative impact they will have on the ability to actually market your cannabis business, because the restrictions are more severe than we see in virtually any other state. I would say maybe any other state, period. But the theory is at least get some stores up and running to compete with some of the black market folks that the state has recently given citations to, which you've seen all around New York City and elsewhere, and get it started and buy time until they can get the full program up and running. That seems to be the approach as far as I can tell. So there are like hundreds, if not thousands of people hovering around right now in various stages of preparing to apply for licenses, not quite sure what the rules are going to be, what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. There are a few things that are sort of fundamental that in virtually any state you should be doing if you want to prepare to get a cannabis license, things like lining up your real estate and your financing and your management team. But the details have yet to be shared by the OCM, so we'll see. There's just no way to really tell. Again, Michael, I'm skipping details here for you. If anybody wants the details, we can provide them. My associates worked really hard on this, and they'd love to share it with you. So, what's going on Long Island? Well, statewide, about half of the municipalities have opted out of cannabis. And for purposes of this statute, that means retail only. No one in the state, no municipality in the state is allowed to opt out of cultivation or manufacturing or distribution, only retail and consumption lounges. So statewide, about half have opted out. On Long Island, of course, almost everyone has opted out. Now, there's a little bit of conflict in data because the Office of Cannabis Management's data, which you would think would be like the official source, is woefully inconsistent with publicly reported information. So I'm not really sure which one to believe, but I tend to believe the publicly reported information from the folks who've attended various town and city and other municipality meetings rather than the OCM website that is likely out of date. So, according to the OCM, there are 31 Nassau County municipalities that did not opt out. In reality, there are 5. Kings Point, Mill Neck, Oyster Bay Cove, Plandome, and Saddle Rock are the only municipalities in Nassau County that, to date, will permit retail cannabis recreational stores. Although, keep in mind, any municipality can opt in at any time. They had to opt out by December 31, 21 if they were going to ever opt out, but once you opt out, you can always opt back in, and there's probably enough of an incentive for them to get a slice of the cannabis revenue that a lot of them may opt back in when they see how much money is going to their neighbors, but that's where we are as of now. Suffolk is marginally better. Again, the OCM thinks 25 Suffolk County towns and municipalities have not opted out, but in reality, I think only 11 have. So interestingly, the entire towns of Babylon, Brookhaven, and Southampton have not opted out. So if anywhere on Long Island you're thinking about opening up a cannabis store, those 3 towns, Babylon, Brookhaven, and Southampton. In addition, some local municipalities, Asher Oakham, Belterre, Henley Harbor, Huntington Bay, North Haven, Oldfield, Riverhead, and West Hampton Dunes have also not opted out and are, as far as I can tell, the only ones who have not opted out. So the LIA thinks that cannabis will provide almost $1 billion of economic activity on Long Island. Maybe if we reduce those opt-outs, that'll go up a little bit. But that's still a lot of economic activity, maybe even almost as much as Leica has produced over the years. I don't know.
Pretty close.
Pretty close, right? So yes, it's quite an industry indeed. I want to thank you all for your time and look forward to talking later.